take a look at it for a minute or two as well. So the first thing to mention is that when you create figures now, perhaps you remember from the last release, we added these different clothing variants to the human. So if you were working in, healthcare or a lab setting versus defense or otherwise, that you could customize the look of the human along with the ethnicity. And now there are gloves added to the human. So for the EAP release, there are latex gloves. This we understand is necessary when in the electronics industry. So gloves are always required, of course, along with healthcare and food and beverage and perhaps others as well. So you can put these gloves on both the full figure and the disembodied hands. And then for the full 2606 release, we will also, or we aim, I should say, to have cotton gloves on the human in addition. And with a cotton glove, of course, you can scale those because of the thickness. In the case of latex, the assumption is that there's no need to add thickness to the gloves. And so this is something I would love to have everyone work with. This is a change that we made to a tool called the VR sequencer. So this is something that until now has been primarily focused at using if you're a VR user. And what it allowed you to do in the past is that you could select, maybe I'll start playing this while I'm talking. It allowed you to select objects that you want to assemble in VR and pick the order for the assembly. And then when you were immersed in VR, you could, get some information. There's a tablet that appears and some instructions to guide a user through the assembly process. And so because we know that this is a very helpful tool for users, we also wanted to explore other ways to work with the VR sequencer. And so one of the things that's introduced in this EAP release is that and I will show you this after I go through the slides, but you can select the objects in the environment in the order that they are to be assembled, and they can be added to a sequence in the VR sequencer. And then from that information, so we know the start and the end location and the order for all of the items, you can actually generate a simulation, so a TSV simulation automatically. So you would see the human then perform the sequence of tasks. So the intent of this is that you can get a very, very quick first pass simulation to see how that order of operations may work, potentially things that you may not have thought of. So here we see the human now performing the tasks. In the case where you have object flows already defined, they can be used as well. So if you click on the flows that are included, the sequencer will pick that up, and then when the human simulation is created, it will guide that object through the flow that's been defined, and the human will follow it. So this is something that we see as hopefully a path forward for us for human simulation creation. The intent is that we can automate more and more of the sim creation. If you use it for your scenarios, excuse me, you'll find it's not perfect, right? There are things that it may not do as you would expect. And those, we've identified some, and we're working on improving the automation of it or the automaticity of it. And we'd be happy to hear from you if there are other things that, you continue to try to do and it kind of messes it up, then reach out to us and let us know, and we can think of how we might be able to improve it. Okay, and then when we look at virtual reality, something to mention is that we have added haptic feedback now to the VR environment. So there's a few things going on in this video, but essentially, if you are performing a sequence of tasks, kind of like I just described, and you want to understand if there's room both for the human and the object that they are interacting with. Maybe you're trying to get through a tight space. you can now enable the immersive feedback for this. There's two things. So here you're seeing these ghosts generated. So anytime a collision happens, we create this visual ghost of where the collision happened. So you can kind of step back and take a look at where the challenge may be. And then in addition to that, if you're, well, when you're holding the controller, at the point of collision, you will also feel a vibration from the controller to give you that tactile input as well to know. So this is another thing that might be interesting for users to play with a little bit, and then let us know, give us some feedback on how it's working also. If you are a Manus glove user, there is no haptics enabled at this time for the gloves. It's something that we've been interacting a bit with Manus on, and it may be something that we can add then in the future. But for now, for this release, the haptics are enabled for essentially any controller that is supported with ProcessSim VR. And then quickly wanted to mention there's support now for an additional headset. So the Pico headset, this is also one that's at a good price point, has great sort of the visualization of it is really nice. So, if you're looking for more variety, this is something that might be of interest. And now, okay, so here's we go here. Here's the VR sequencer. So if you're in the view menu where the other VR controls are, for now, you'll find VR sequencer here. So you can toggle that open and closed. For the full release, we are going to rename this because it has now applicability also outside of VR. I think it will be called the task sequencer, and eventually you'll find it in the simulate menu here also. But for the EAP, you can open VR sequencer, and I can show you in a second kind of how we create the tasks. I'll zoom in first though on the gloves on the human. So here you can see the latex gloves on the figure. And if you were to open the create human dialog and come here, you now see these different options available. So you can make that customization. But okay, getting back to the sequencer. So let's imagine in this example, we want her to move all of these different bottles onto this conveyor into its tray. So I'll set up another one, but for now, I just want to show you that the intent is she'll start like so with everything in the bin, and one by one, the idea is for her to move the bottles, as we just mentioned, sort of onto this conveyor. And so with this sequence as it is, you could launch VR and act this out. What I want to show you is if you didn't have this defined yet, how to start from scratch. So the way I like to interact with the VR sequencer is I tend to create one snapshot for the beginning of my simulation. I lost Jill. There she is. And then I create one snapshot that represents what everything would look like once it's assembled or the sequence is complete. And then I can come here and create a new sequence. Go create. And we can set our start snapshot. So this is what it would look like when Jill begins the simulation. And then here I need to update this now. I should have set it first, but essentially we are defining what the initial scene configuration is for this sequence. Then typically what I do is I now would apply the finishing snapshot. So this is where everything is in order, is assembled. And what I would do is pick the order. So I'm using the control button on my keyboard and multi-selecting these items in the order that I want her to interact with them. And now when I pick the initial scene configuration and step through, we see how everything becomes complete. So this is not new. This you can do today in, existing releases. The new part is down here, you should see this TSB simulation. And this is where we can now set a few items or variables to help guide the simulation. So if we have walk obstacles, which means things we do not want her to collide with, then those can be, selected in the scene. And so when any walk paths are planned for the human, she will avoid these things that we've selected. In this case, she probably doesn't need to walk, so it won't really apply, but I wanted to show you it's there. Other things are we can pick, if you can update the hand that's used to interact or get the object. So it defaults currently to the right hand, but you can change it to the left or select both. In addition, the grasp direction. So if you know for sure you want the human to pick it up from above or below, you can choose to set this as well. If you don't know or you want to see what's solved automatically, you can just pick auto and have it, created for you. So basically now I've defined the order for the tasks and some walk obstacles. I changed the hand to grasp in a couple of places. And so now I can select create simulation. I see I didn't move I didn't move that first one, so hopefully it works. Okay, so now it's created a new simulation. We have all these get input tasks. And if I play it, we see the human perform all of these tasks. So the intent with this is that it makes the simulation creation much more quicker. So this you could do in a few minutes as opposed to manually defining each get and put for these different activities. Now, if for some reason you wanted to come back in and make edits, this is a regular TSB simulation. So you can come in here, you can select operation properties and make edits to it the same way you would any other simulation that you've created in the past. So that is the summary of what I wanted to show. And please do give it a try. Let us know how it works for you. And that's it.